Okay, so we're recording. While I'm opening up the agenda for today, questions about last time, like anything between Monday and now that has popped up in your guys' minds? I know, yes,
You said that you
Caitlin.
wanted to look up the Globus thing for the quiz, the little helper guide that we're supposed to read.
Yep.
But you can't look up words, or at least I can't. You said you could look up words. I don't know what you meant by look up, because I know there's documents where you can actually search a word.
Yeah.
It takes you where it is.
Have you not, have you searched PDFs for words before?
No, it wasn't PDFs.
PDF. Let me help with that. Hang on.
I tried your Blackboard and the one on the website, and I couldn't search anything. All I had was a little bar at the bottom for print, save, zoom.
Well, it probably depends on a couple things. Did you the document on Blackboard? Let me focus on the document on Blackboard for a second. So on Blackboard, course documents, participants guide right there. So it's a PDF document. Let's see first of all. Okay, so usually, if you click on it, it opens up in. This is actually opening it up in your web browser. So it's opening up in HTML format. If you go here and then find. So every place where it says mark is highlighted. Okay. Although interestingly, this mark is not highlighted. That is if you're using the browser. Okay. I am accustomed to actually using this in Adobe rather than in the browser.
That's what I remember using.
So if you open it up in Adobe, you open up in Adobe, and you just right-click in anywhere in the document and click Find. Now, I found that mark. What's that? There's a couple different ways. The way I did it just now. You wanna repeat that again?
Well, you can on the computer and stuff. You can hit Control F and it'll bring up the little bar at the top.
How do you open up the Adobe from that page?
I think from the browser to
Adobe. Do I want to? No, not right now. The way I did it just now was I hit the download button here up in the right-hand corner, and then it asks you, do you want to save it or open it in Adobe? Most of your machines should already have Adobe installed as a default. If not, for some reason, it won't say open with Adobe. But if you save it, you can either open it directly from there in Adobe or just save it somewhere on your local drive and then open it with Adobe. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, one of two options. Caitlin, does that answer your question? And it's Katie, right? Not Caitlin?
Whichever
okay.
One you can remember.
I will try to remember both. Okay, so that's that question. Other questions from last time before I move on? Nathan?
In what format would you like us to give you the professional development plan? So you print it out and give it to you, or turned in somewhere on Blackboard?
I want you to upload it. I sent everybody a link to a Google Drive folder. Upload it to that folder. So name it like Sheets_Nathan. Everybody name it like last name _ first name, and you can just open that folder and then go to your Windows Explorer and drag and drop the file in. It'll copy it. And I forgot to put it up here, but if you go into the PDF, the PowerPoint from the professional development plan, just use this slide right here like delete the rest of the presentation or copy this into a new PowerPoint, use that slide, and just fill these boxes out. Make sense?
Just one moment, giving us a quick breakdown of the expectations for each three of those.
Sure. Sure. So, baseline, I want to know what your job is right now and what your income is right now. So, job goes here, income goes here, and I want to know like income and burn rate. So, income is, $2,000 a month. Burn rate is $1,500, or income is $1,500 and burn rate is $2,000. That's okay too, because if you need to be making more money, I want to know that so I can make sure to like have the appropriate urgency in helping you to get solutions to wherever you're at. So the baseline is what you do right now for your job, how much you make and how much you spend. Mid-range is what's the next step. So in the presentation that I went through, I kind of listed some possible next steps. Usually it's either earning more in your current job, moving to a new job in the same company, moving to the same kind of job in a new company, moving to a new industry, maybe going back to grad school. And I listed here at the bottom internships, volunteer opportunities, because a lot of times if you're trying to get into something, where there's a lot of people that want to get into it. Like when I think I told you guys this story, but when I first was working in the music business, if I had just gotten over my bad self and been willing to work for free, I would have a lot more powerful friends in the music business these days. I insisted on getting paid and was frustrated when I was making minimum wage and the rest of my friends from MBA were working on Wall Street for a lot of money. But when you want to get into a new industry and it's hard to break in, sometimes the next step is to just find some way to volunteer. You get your foot in your door, you make friends, and then it's easier. So depending on where you want to go next, probably one of these options is what you're going to put in the mid-range box. And if it's making more money in your current job, how much more money do you want to make, and how does that impact what you're able to spend in your burn rate?
So you want us to do somewhat of an itemized projected burn rate for mid-range and long-term?
The more information I have, the better. I mean, if your burn rate, for most undergrads, a revenue would be somewhere in the range of, anywhere from 20,000 on the low end to 40 or 50,000 on the high end, and that would make your monthly burn rate somewhere between, a stable burn rate would be somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000. So, I mean, depending on what your income, what your income is, what your job is, and what your burn rate is, if it all makes sense to me, all I need to know is the numbers. If something doesn't make sense, okay, you're working basically in an entry level job in retail, but you're making 40 grand, it doesn't match, or you didn't mention anything about sharing costs with the spouse or living at home or whatever, and you say your burn rate's $500 a month. But no adult who lives on their own in this town can survive on $500 a month. So I would ask more, what do you mean only 500? But I don't want to dive into the more details than you want to give me. But if something doesn't make sense, then the reason for me asking is to be able to help to problem solve and troubleshoot on moving from the situation you're in now to a better one, whatever that is. Make sense? Okay. So, and that's what mid-range is. It's just what do you want to do next, and what are the revenue, the income and spending implications of that. And then for long term, I really want you to dream big. You want to be a millionaire. You want to own a Learjet. Want to be megalomaniacal, like king of the world. All of those. King of the world may have implications for the rest of your classmates that aren't good, but far be it from me to I want you guys to dream big. So this should be, I want to own my own business, or I want to be the CEO of a corporation, or I want to run for president one day. Whatever it is, tell me big, and try your best to estimate what like if the goal is something related to income. So I want to be a millionaire. Like as I pointed out a little bit in the presentation from last week, in ballpark terms, depending on what your return is on your investment, being a millionaire means you need to save $20,000 a year and invest it at an above average return rate for between 20 and 30 years. So becoming a millionaire doesn't fall out of the sky, but we can plan between now and then how does one get from point A to point B. I want you to dream big on what the costs are and dream big on what the professional goal is here. This can be as stretch of a goal as you want. Make sense? Okay. Other questions? Okay. You're welcome to ask them later too. Let me dive into this week's, or today's, not this week's, agenda. So, like I pointed out a little bit in the syllabus when I talked about the class overview last week, there's two main work elements to what you produce in this class. One is your team output on Globus, which we talked all about on Monday. The other thing is your individual case analysis, which we're going to talk all about today. So, when I was in management consulting for Price Waterhouse, my job every day, what got me the job in the first place and what helped me to move up in the organization, make more money, have bigger titles, was being able to do this crap every day. And whether it's at Price Waterhouse or it's as an analyst inside of an oil company or an analyst, a department or division manager in an ag company, these same skills are pretty much broadly useful in most of the positions many of you will go into. Some of them, depending on the exact job, some of them are more immediately relevant, some less, but these are all sort of general ways to analyze how a company's doing and express it in concise bullet point terms. So that's the whole point of today's lecture, and that's the whole point of half of your grade in this class, the 350 points for your final individual case analysis and the 25 points each for your drafts, the first of which is due this weekend. And there's also a folder on Google Docs that you'll upload that to. I'll talk about that again at the end of the lecture today. So what's due by the end of this weekend is just the management analysis tools. No, wait a minute. That's next weekend, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm juggling. Last year I actually didn't require the drafts, and it's natural that you guys get busy with not just other classes but the rest of your lives, and only a relative handful of the people did the drafts, and the quality of the end products reflect that. So my goal here is that you guys leave this class with a case analysis paper that you can show to any potential employer and be proud of. It's a legitimate work document that shows that underlines your capabilities. So to that end, I've now put in that they're actually due, and instead of having the whole paper worth 500, the drafts are worth 25 each, and then the paper's worth the rest. So it kind of makes it easier for you to get an A if you just submit the drafts each week, because I'm a lot easier on grading the drafts than I am on the overall paper. So anyway, yeah, that's due next weekend. So we'll get strike that. Sorry, I'm thinking about changes I made to the syllabus, and it's the first time I made the change. So just the professional development plan, LinkedIn, and then the Globus individual quiz and your practice decisions are due this weekend. Next weekend is the management analysis tools. So what I want to go over today is just show you guys what the final product looks like and explain what all of the different parts are and how they fit together. And then next Monday for the lecture, I will just go into detail about exactly how I want you to fill out the management tools section. And then you'll have until the end of the weekend to fill that out. I will then go over, make comments as fast as I can after that, and we'll discuss some of the papers in class, and anybody else that I wasn't able to get to can ask me questions afterwards about my comments and your markups. And if you just basically make the edits that I suggested in my markups on your drafts, you get an A on the final paper. Make sense? Okay, so, and then for the career development portion, remind me at the end that I want to like loop back to that spreadsheet of what each of your like focus is for your career goals and your case analysis. Some of you are already really clear on what you wanted to do. Others of you weren't quite sure. So I know. Damn. I just remembered your name too. Mariah, I know you were talking about it perhaps being difficult to find information on like car dealerships, basically, because they're all privately owned. I mean, that's the way the car dealerships work. For those of you who want to research a privately owned company, I can go through some tips and help on how to find information on those. Obviously, it's a lot easier to just do GM versus Volkswagen. Either way, I'm good. And some of you weren't sure yet. I may have made a suggestion that you want to change, so remind me at the end here before we leave for the rest of the week to loop back to that list. Okay? So, going back to Blackboard and back down to the course documents section and case analysis materials. I'm going to start with the Google case sample case. Let's here. Let me actually start with the case analysis template with info sources. So this is more or less this exercise is more or less case analysis paint by numbers. Like I've provided you with a template here, which is 13 pages long, and I put I want all of you to just open up this template, save it on your local drive, and over the course of the rest of the quarter, you're going to fill this thing out. Right now, it's blank. By each week, you'll fill out part of it for your draft, and by the end of the quarter, we'll have a complete document. So, in red, I've written whatever information you need to know about what you have to do to fill it out. So, there's a summary portion, there's a business model portion. Scrolling down, you'll notice that I gave you tips here at the top on exactly what databases to use to find the information, or if there is no database, that it's supposed to be in your own words. And I've given you some tips on what I want. So that's all. This is the raw document that I want you guys to fill out over the course of the next 7 weeks, 8 weeks, blah 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 blah. That's there. Just open it up from Blackboard, download it to your local drive. This is what it will look like when it's done. Except it won't be color-coded. I color-coded this one so you can see where I got each of the pieces of information that I put in here. So I filled this out as an example for you guys of how I would do a case analysis of actually Google versus Microsoft. What's that? This file is Google case sample case analysis. The Google case here is just an example for you guys. This is actually the Google case from the book. But what I did is I made notes in this thing, so you'll see here exec. That stuff that stuff is relevant for putting in the managerial execution tool. This information here is relevant for the business model tool. This is here for market positioning maps. This is a bit irrelevant because I don't use the cases from the book anymore. But if you're researching a well-known company like Volkswagen, for example, there's no Volkswagen case in our textbook, But there's plenty of cases that have been written over the years on Volkswagen, and you can go out online and just search on our library databases or search on Google, and you can find, if you wanted to use that, Mariah, you could find a case on Volkswagen that has a lot of interesting information in it. So for those of you who are researching more well-known companies, this is a good model for how to quickly go through like a 20-page case description and just cherry pick the information that you want. This is not really necessary for what I want you guys to do. I used to use the cases from the book, but most 80 to 90% of you don't want to work for companies that happen to be in our cases in the book. And I think it's a waste of time for you to do a case on Google if you don't have any intention of working for Google. I want you to do a case on the industry that you want to go into. So in that respect, I've gotten away from using this over the last couple of years, but it's still here as an example for how to find information if you find one of these things online. Does that make sense? Okay. So the one that has the example of how the complete document is filled out is Google Case Sample Case Analysis. And that's the one I'm going to go through right now. So the document starts out with a summary section. I'm actually going to skip past this and talk about this last, because even though it's at the front of the document, it's actually the last section that you're going to fill out after you've done all the rest of the sections. So let me come back to that at the end of the lecture today and start with management analysis tools. So there's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 sections of this case. There's management analysis tools, which are basically kind of top level, as the name would imply. As a manager, how's the company working? What is the general business that we're in? How do we manage it on a day-to-day basis? And there's a specific dashboard as well on how do we manage not just the operations of the company, but how we're impacting society as a whole. So those are the 3 tools that are in management analysis. I'll go through each one. After that, there is an external analysis section, which basically is looking at both your competitors and your customers, basically. An internal analysis section, which is looking at your internal operations from 2 different points of view, both how you're leveraging the various different parts of your geographically dispersed operation. And for smaller companies, that's actually more about how you're working together with partners than it is managing divisions of your company. But when you're working for a large organization, it's about how do the different divisions or parts of the company work as a whole. And then the other one is about the different major day-to-day operations that are important for that kind of company and how to do them more efficiently. And then finally, there's a financial analysis section at the end. And then once you've done all of that, the summary is basically summarizing what do you think is the most important issue facing these 2 companies, and what are your suggestions for one of the 2 companies in each of the toolbox areas. Does that make sense? Okay, so going through quickly, the business model here, the first tool under management analysis is basically in your own words. You'll see it's all here in blue. If you go back up to the top, blue means that it's in your own words. So what I want to know in value proposition is, what does the company do that's valuable from the customer's point of view, not their own description of their vision or their mission, but why do people pay for Google, or why do they pay for Microsoft? So I don't need more than a sentence or 2 here. We're not talking about a long essay. We're talking about a sentence or 2 explaining. When it comes right down to it, Google is an advertising company. We all use Google to search for stuff, but we use Google for free. We're actually in some ways Google's supplier. We supply advertising. We supply consumers with eyeballs to Google. Google sells our clicks to people that want to advertise their products. So Google the value that they offer is being able to deliver a bunch of eyeballs for an affordable price for advertisers. Microsoft, at the end of the day, they make stuff like Word that I'm using right now to be personally productive. So either in a business setting or a personal setting. That's usually why I pay money to Microsoft, is because I want to use the damn software to get things done. So that is, in a nutshell, is what I want there. Profit model, I basically want you to tell me how does money come in, and how often does it come in. So, with Google, they're basically collecting weekly, monthly payments from advertisers. If I take a different example in the automotive business, if we're talking about VW and GM, they're basically, there's a bunch of upfront costs. I would imagine you know this better than I do with your family's dealership, but is it your family or?
Yeah.
Okay, your family's dealership. Like, I would imagine you're a Chevrolet dealership, right?
Yeah.
So GM ships you a bunch of cars and trucks and so forth, and you keep them on the lot for a certain period of time, and whatever you sell, a chunk of that money goes back to GM. Are you paying them up front for the cars before they arrive on the lot, or are you paying them after you sell them? Huh? So if you get a shipment of 20 cars from GM, a payment went from the dealership for 20 cars to GM, and then you're getting your money back?
I think.
Okay.
I don't exactly
Well,
work with that specific.
but that's okay. But this is the kind of things that I want to know, where does the money come from? In GM's case, the money basically comes from dealers. And when does it come? My assumption was that GM's got a hell of a lot more money than the dealership does. So they would probably float you the cars for much less than they're worth, and then you pay the rest of it when they get sold.
Yeah, I don't think we pay completely.
So you may pay a down payment, and then you give the rest of them for each car sold.
Yes.
But that makes a big difference for GM's revenues. Even though GM's a ginormous company, if they spend 10 to 20 grand on average per car manufactured, or 5 to 10, and you multiply that by 100,000 cars, 100,000 times 10,000 is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros we have to add to 100,000. That's well over $1 billion, isn't it? I think. That's $1 billion worth of air rather than money. So it's important for them to know when the money comes in. And same thing for every business. Sometimes you get paid right away up front per deal. Sometimes you have a lot of upfront costs and money comes in periodically. So I would imagine Anna, you're gonna work. I think you're personally more interested in real estate than Schwarzmüller, but Schwarzmüller also makes big things that cost a fair amount of money, and you have I imagine you have a lot of upfront costs before you actually get paid for a large shipment of trailers.
Yeah, they get paid whenever they pick up
Yeah.
customers, they don't need them, and just don't pick them up, so there's no money there.
Yeah. So that's what I want to know here. Variable costs, we'll talk about more in detail next week. I want to know what are the costs that vary depending on whether you make more or less or something. So whenever you're making a thing like trailers, your variable costs are all of the parts, the labor, etc., that goes into making each trailer. Your fixed costs are things like research and development, advertising, sales, administrative staff, databases and IT systems, stuff like that. So I want you to break it out into 3 sentences for me and tell me what's the major way that revenue comes in and how often does it come in? What are the major variable costs and what are the major fixed costs? And then for resources needed, I basically just want you to repeat what the fixed costs are, what the variable and fixed costs are. So forget about revenues, just look at the costs and repeat to me in words what are the major costs. So if I have a bunch of R&D costs, the reason I have those is because I'm developing a cutting edge search engine with them. So I also need to have talented R&D staff if I'm going to do R&D work. So it's really just rephrasing the costs in terms of what you have to have in order to accomplish that cost. Does that make sense? Okay. That is the business model in a nutshell. Usually, for most of you, if you're comparing two companies in the same industry, these boxes are going to be exactly the same for both companies. One of the unique things about comparing Google and Microsoft, and this is the case with a lot of high-tech companies and sort of emerging industries, Google, Google and Microsoft is one of the main issues in the case to me when you analyze these companies. They're two different kind of companies. I mean, Google, at the end of the day, Google is an advertising company and Microsoft is a consumer products company. It's a huge difference. And which of those two companies will be successful in the future largely depends on which business model is more conducive to the society that we grow into in the future. So, but normally, if you're comparing two auto manufacturers, you know, basically they both make cars that help people get around for a cheap and for a cheap price and like relatively safe driving conditions. That's basically what all auto manufacturers do. Their revenues, their variable costs, their fixed costs are all the same, and the resources needed are all the same. So you could practically do one box, like one column for both companies. If you're comparing two companies that have slightly different business models, or sometimes if you're comparing a small company to a large one, if you compared Pepsi, for example, with Red Bull, Pepsi and Coke, either one, are the owners of Monster and Amp and all the other competing energy drinks to Red Bull. Red Bull is largely still a private company. I think they actually have issued some public stock, but it's a much smaller company. They're based out of it's Switzerland? Is it Austria? Okay, so they're based out of Austria. They're a much smaller company, and Red Bull just does Red Bull. Like Pepsi sells every kind of drink you can imagine, as well as all kinds of different snacks and everything else. So Pepsi's business model is actually like making everything possible, which is relatively unhealthy for you, but tastes really good, and putting it on shelves ubiquitously everywhere in the world so that you can get it like soon. Red Bull specifically sells energy drinks, and really, arguably, they sell a brand image as well. So in that case, those two companies have slightly different business models. But if you're comparing two companies that do almost the exact same thing, and here, hang on one second, you're going to have just one column for both. Yes?
I'm still figuring out what I want, what companies do I do right now. Could I do like two different industries? Like right now, I'm in healthcare, but I'm not sure if I would want to continue in healthcare or I would want to move to like financial.
Sure. I would say.
Compare like my healthcare that I am right now and financial.
I would say that is a great way for you to compare industries and potentially bridge your career. It's going to be more work for you. It's easier to compare two healthcare companies than a healthcare company and a financial services company like Northwestern Mutual or J.P. Morgan Chase. It's more work for you, but I think it'd be a great idea. You're welcome to compare two industries. Make sense? Okay. Other questions before I keep going? Okay, so that's the first part. The second tool is managerial execution. For any of you who have friends that took this class from me last year, they had more work to do here than you guys do. I have simplified this. When I go through the lecture, there's actually 8 different elements of managerial execution. Some of them are easier to research than others, and the workload in this class, both for you when you do it and for me when I grade it, was getting a little out of control. So I cut this down to the 4 important ones. So in my lecture, I'm going to talk about some other stuff that in your actual jobs in the future is going to be important. For the case, there's just 4 areas that I want you to tell me about. So basically, this tool is all about how does the company manage their day-to-day operations. So first of all, how do they, I've written here in the first column in words, what do I want? So how does the company recruit, retain, and empower staff? What kind of hardware and software do they use? How do they pay, and how do they incent employees, both monetarily as well as non-monetarily? And then finally, what do the leaders of the company do to either inspire staff or solve problems or operationally in the company? So in most of the cases, you'll see here in red, I actually want you to go out and use the library's databases. This is one of the another key skill that I want you to come away from this class with, is how to quickly look for a needle in a haystack in doing internet searches for information, and be able to like cherry pick information and put it in here quickly. So you'll notice 3 of these came from searches that I did online. The green I haven't filled in yet. Like basically, you would go out and search for these, or if you happen to work for Google or Microsoft, or you know someone that does, you could actually just ask them and put in the information that they told you, or put in your own information if you work for the company. But I want you to get experience using, like, doing these searches. So at least half of these 8 boxes, so at least 4 out of the 8 boxes, need to have information in them that you found using the database searches. Okay? I will go through next week exactly how to do the searches, which database is which, like some tips for the search terms. But basically, you're going to go out, you're going to find this originally, and you'll see here footnotes at the bottom. This actually came from the 10Q report of Google in 2012. I put this thing together a couple years ago, so if I were doing it again today, there'd be more updated information. The fact that Google bought Motorola is yesterday's news, but it was news when I wrote it. I actually went and I found the 10Q report. How many people here are like accounting, finance majors? Or at least focus, you're all business majors, but okay, so Natasha, right? Natasha, what is a 10Q report? Lovepreet, did you have your hand up? Dahi? 10Q? Okay, so a 10Q report. Did anybody else? Did somebody know the answer to this before I forget other hands that were up? Okay, a 10Q report is every company that has publicly traded stocks. So if you can go, and I can go to my investment broker and say, hey, I would like you to buy some stock in Google for me. If I am able, as a member of the public, to buy stock in Google, then Google has all kinds of reporting requirements that they have to give to the government on a regular basis. So a 10Q report is a big, long document where Google says every business quarter, that's what the Q is for, quarter. Every business quarter they say all of their revenues, all of their costs, and they talk a bunch about operations. So these are the new things that are going on in the company. These are the problems we had. This is how we solved them. And this is all publicly available. You can find it in a database called Edgar, which I will show you guys how to access when we talk about the details next week. And I just read through that thing, and as I was reading through, I was like, oh my goodness. Google bought Motorola. Who knew? They just mentioned it in one of the paragraphs, yeah, and by the way, we bought Motorola so that we can extend our reach in the mobile mobile search platform market. Wow, okay. So that certainly tells me something about how they recruit, empower and retain people. They recruited an entire company by buying them. Everybody, rather than going out and hiring people that had competence in cell phone technology and how to build more relationships with cell phone carriers, they just went out and bought the whole damn Motorola company, so now everybody from Motorola works for Google. So that's one way to answer that. You could find a lot of other ways to answer it about how Google does their hiring process, what they do afterwards for when people are in the company to incent them. I mean, Google is famous, for example, for having a slide that you can slide down, and they got little pods that you can take a nap in, and ping pong tables, and everybody wears shorts and t-shirts. And that's What they don't tell you is that the reason, and there's a laundromat on campus and so forth, like what they don't tell you is the reason all that is there is because they never want you to go home. Like, so Natasha, yes.
Don't they have like basically like neighborhoods like around there where people they like all like live around there?
Pretty much. Yeah, but like back 150 years ago, like back 150 years ago, like I think Pullman, Washington. I think there's a city in Washington State called Pullman. So Pullman's the name of a train car. Like originally, everybody who manufactured worked for Pullman and made that train car. They all live in Pullman, Washington, and they buy their food at the Pullman store. And it's a little Big Brother, It's a little bit like disturbing, but at the same time, it is really convenient. So. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of fun at Google, and one of the ways that they keep people there is making it a fun environment. But the reason they have to do that is because they have you work so damn long that you have no personal life. So, yes, Google is also like a lot of like the surrounding area is Google apartments, so that when you do go home, like you don't get very far. So, heaven forbid, if they need you back like at 3 a.m, then you can get there in 5 minutes. Like. Heaven forbid that you should be sleeping. So anyway, what I want you to do is go out. Like this originally came from a giant 50-page report, and I just cherry-picked one sentence out of it. You could put 1 or 2 sentences here, but that's basically what you're doing. A lot of times you're going to find news articles that were written in Business Week or are on like the Reuters Newswire talking about something, Microsoft has decided to install a brand new hardware system where everyone's tablets actually everyone in the company is issued a tablet and a cell phone and a desktop, and the desktop actually is not a desktop anymore. It's just a computer on the desk. And it's a big new hardware initiative that they're doing. I'm making this up right now, but if you found that news online, you would just summarize it in a sentence or two and put it here. Does that make sense? And then you're going to put a footnote at the bottom of the page where you found the information. And we'll get into the details of all that next week, but that's basically the exercise here. Going out on the internet, finding news reports of one kind or another. This black information here is actually something that I pulled out of the Google case from the textbook. So sometimes if you find a case written about the company, whether it's in our textbook or somewhere you found online when you did a search, you can also find information to put in these boxes in those documents. Questions about that tool before I move on? Okay, the last tool in the managerial execution section is corporate responsibility measures. This is basically about, like I said, what's the impact of the company on the rest of society? So in big picture terms, ethical behavior, I want to know about what lawsuits have been brought against the company. That's the easiest thing to search on. More broadly stated, this is also about, what is the attitude of management and leadership in the company about the value of employees, about the value of customers, about their responsibility as a company to treat people in a humane and respectful way. But the easiest thing to find when you're doing these searches is just lawsuits brought against the company. Any company of significant size over the course of time has had to deal with some kind of lawsuit. Corporate citizenship, very simply, I want to know what charities does the company donate to. Any company of any significant size, again, donates to all kinds of charities. They have volunteer fund drives all the time, even small companies. So I would imagine, depending on how big Richland Chevrolet is, do you guys donate to charity or as a company, or do you just do it personally as a family?
No, the company does.
Okay.
It's just local stuff.
Yeah, but so probably getting involved in breast cancer fundraising drive or helping to raise money for a food bank, something like that.
Yeah.
What's actually, rather than me putting words in your mouth, what's an example?
Like Relay for Life, we do, or we donate to the athletics programs and the community in the high school all the time, and FFA, stuff like that.
Exactly. So these are all things that, even though Richland Chevrolet is a family-owned company, relatively small, as a company, you're still donating to charity. When it's a really, really small company that you're running yourself, I mean, you as a human being, all of us have like our favorite cause in life, our favorite like hobby, our favorite pastime, like something. There's always like a contribution you're making, and most companies of any type, of any size whatsoever, are giving money to charity. And then if it's a not-for-profit for some reason, or a government agency that you're analyzing, even though not-for-profits technically are the recipients of donations, not the donators themselves, large not-for-profits or government entities will encourage employees at least to get involved in volunteer activities, to get involved in the community. And if it's actually a not-for-profit or a government agency you're talking about, I want to know what is the organization doing to encourage its staff to get involved in the community outside of what they already do for the not-for-profit. And then finally, for sustainability, this is usually about the impact of the company on the natural environment. So in the case of Google and Microsoft, I mean, arguably the biggest sustainability issue with Google and Microsoft is that, like, running ginormous servers and encouraging people to be online 24/7, whether it's like using Microsoft's Office and personal productivity products to work on your own laptop or your own desktop, or it's searching for things on Google. Like, there's this thing called electricity that we've all grown up with and like sort of accept that it's omnipresently there. Electricity like is generated largely by burning fossil fuels. I mean, sometimes it's hydroelectric, there's other ways to generate energy, but the same energy that it takes to like drive your car around and so forth and so on, like it also has an environmental cost to provide the electricity to use Google and Microsoft's products. So that's, you'll see here, Google cooperated on a study to try and move much more work to the cloud in certain areas so that there'd be electricity savings in the LA area. In addition to the natural environment, depending on the type of company, so if you're looking at, if I go back to Pepsi and Red Bull for a second, if you're looking at a consumer products type company like that makes snacks, I mean, arguably, it's not healthy to drink a bunch of like sugar water all day. And I mean, I love drinking like regular good old Pepsi with sugar in it, but it's really not that good for you. And neither are like greasy, oily potato chips and like all kinds of snacks. I love them, but they're not really good for the health of people in our country and all around the world. So, but Pepsi will probably continue selling you as many like Pepsis as you want until like you keel over from a heart attack or like type 2 diabetes because you drank so many damn sodas that you totally screwed up your blood sugar levels. They'll probably continue selling you Pepsis even if it's not healthy for you. So in that case, it's not so much about the impact on the natural environment, it's about the impact that Pepsi is having on the like physical health of people in our society by selling products that are basically unhealthy for you. So depending on what kind of company you're analyzing, that's what I want to know here is what is the company doing? Either what is a bad impact it's having that it's not dealing with, or even better, what is something it's trying to do to address or fix the impacts that it does have on the society. And those are the 3 management analysis tools. So that is what you're going to fill out everything on those 3 pages for next weekend. Make sense? And if you can't find something here, you can't find something there, do your best. Like the way that I do the grading on the drafts, as long as you made an effort to fill in all the boxes, and if you couldn't find something, like I know I've been running this class for a while. I can tell if you spent a half an hour searching around trying to find something, or if you did one search and we're like, I couldn't find anything, I'm just going to say I couldn't find it. Like, I can tell whether you actually like did a little bit of like legwork or not. So if you did the legwork and it's just not quite there and it was hard to find, as long as you show me that you did do the legwork, I'll give you the full 25 points. If you sort of mailed it in and I can tell, like, you know, I know full well that all you had to do was search on like Microsoft and charity, and it's not that hard to find. Like, you could do a Google search and in less than 2 minutes find something that Microsoft donates to charity on. If that box is empty, clearly, like, you just didn't like take the time to do it. If it's a box where I know, yeah, it's kind of hard to find, and it's not such a big deal. But if there's a couple boxes where things are missing, I give you 20 instead of 25. And if you filled in a box here and a box there and everything else, like, just you didn't finish, and you really kind of mailed it in, I'll give you 15 instead of 25. So it's 25, 20, 15. I think that's what I put in the syllabus, isn't it? Yes?
Like 30, 20.
Oh, wait a minute.
30, 20, 10.
Thank you. Because 30 times, yeah, okay, because it's 5 instead of 6, that's why. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I thought we had, I used to have 6 things that you had to do instead of 5. So each one is worth 30, 30, 20, 10. So 20, if, like, there's multiple things that you didn't fill out that I know are relatively easy to fill out. 10, if you simply, like, sent me a document that has one box filled out and everything else is empty. Like, come on. Like, if your classmates made the effort to try and fill out the boxes and you didn't, I'm not going to give you the same grade they got. But I'm going to give you something just for doing the work. Like, even if you just send me anything, then it gives me the opportunity to go in and make comments and tell you what I want you to change, and you get points for that. So, as long as you did something, like, it's pretty hard to get a 10 on that. Does that make sense? As long as you made a good effort to fill out the boxes, I'll give you full points. If you clearly didn't put in the same effort that your classmates did, I'll take off a few points, but otherwise, I don't care if you got it right or you got it wrong. The whole point of doing a draft is for me to go in and edit and tell you what to change. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so that's what to do next weekend. Moving on to the rest of the example, what'll be due 2 weekends from now are the external analysis tools. So 2 weekends, not this weekend, not, you know what I mean. The weekend of the 8th of 9th. Yeah, the weekend that starts Friday the 9th, so 10th, 11th, Sunday is when this stuff would be due. Is external analysis tools. So this is everything about the competition and customers of the company. So this looks like a lot, but basically you're going to go out to the databases. You're going to find a very specific type of report called there's a certain report that I want you to open up. You're going to go to a certain page in there that talks about trends impacting the future of the industry. There's probably going to be 10, 20 different trends. I want you to read those 2 pages or 3 pages that they're on, and then exercise your own judgment to pick what you think are the top 2 or what you think are the top 3 trends impacting the future of that industry that you're researching. So this is the same for both companies. You don't do one for one company and one for the other company. They're both in the same industry, so they're both facing the same issues. Unless, of course, you want to make more work for yourself, like Yanira does. And that way, in your case, you're going to do one of these for healthcare and one of them for financial services. But all you're doing is going and copying and pasting. Okay, so it's only 150. Technically, we have until 250, right? So let me go ahead and show you quick so that it doesn't look quite so daunting. I'll go into the details of all this again when I do the lecture on these tools, but basically, for this, you're going to go to the library. You're going to go to articles and databases. You're going to go to, so actually the easiest way to do this then is the research basic databases by title that lists them all alphabetically. you're going to go down to First Research Industry Profiles, and I will like give you all this information in the slides as well that like we go over in the lecture. You go there, and you type in like healthcare. Healthcare sector, quarterly update 2012. That's a little old. Let's see if we can find something newer. (2013, 2014, 2015). That's, you know, you can use one of the older ones too. If it doesn't take too long, try to find something that's as recent as possible. So click there. That's going to open up a PDF file, and you'll note this is like, actually I highly encourage you to save these to your local drive. Like when you leave Cal State, actually as an alum, you can still come back and use the library, but I don't think you'll be able to access it remotely as easily as you can while you're a student. So, like, if you did not have a subscription to First Research, like we pay for here at Cal State with part of your tuition fees, so part of your tuition goes to pay a relatively high, like in the tens of thousands of dollars annual subscription to this company so that they provide us with all these reports. So I would suggest that you download these for the sectors that you're interested in your career to your local drive, so that when you leave, you already have them and you don't have to pay for them later. Like if you went in and like access these one at a time as a private individual, they'd cost you $100, $200 a piece. So save them now while you can for free. But if you just scroll down, you'll see there's more things, more than you ever wanted to know about the healthcare industry. And you'll see here critical issues, business challenges, business trends, industry opportunities. All of these areas are talking about trends and issues facing the industry. So once you read through those 2 or 3 pages, you think, okay, I think healthcare reform is a big, important issue. So you're going to take that like title, healthcare reform, copy, go to your template, just paste it right there. And then you go do the same thing for, wait a minute. Then you're going to take all the text here, copy that, and paste it here. So, and then, you know, please make it look nice. A lot of times when you copy and paste from a PDF document into a Word document, it makes the margins all funky. So you have to go back and like do some deleting to get things to actually not jump from one line to the next. There. And then after you've done that for the 3 things that you think are most important, you're just going to take this. Now that's a ProQuest search. I'll go into this in more detail. Sometimes you're just going to take the address here that you found it at. Sometimes you're actually going to have to tell me the like report number. So you'll notice here at the bottom. Maybe it's at the very, very bottom of the document. I can't remember. Anyway, I'll go into the details of exactly what I want you to footnote for each type of database resource when we do that lecture. But a lot of times you're just going to copy the web address and go in here. And how many people in here are familiar with how to add footnotes in Word? So I have not yet called on John today.
Footnote,
Yeah.
insert, footnote, header.
Yep. It's actually not, in this case, it's not insert. It's going to be references. So you go to the references tab, insert footnote, and then you can just paste that address there and you just have to do it once because they all came from the same document, you know? Does that make sense? So actually I put 4 here instead of 3. I want at least 3. If there are 4 you think are important, please put 4. Please do not simply copy and paste everything that's in there, because then you didn't actually exercise any initiative to read through them and choose which you thought were most important. Okay? But there's not a lot of typing here. You're just copying and pasting, and then citing or footnoting where you got the stuff. Make sense? Yes? Okay. So moving on along, that actually made things jump over to the next page. If they do jump over to the next page, please go back and try and chop out some stuff. So that it still fits on one page and you don't have move that over a little bit. There. So I'd like it to fit on one page. If you really have a whole bunch of information, it's okay to put it on 2, but I don't like if the box starts on this page, I want the box to end on this page. So if there's no way to get it all to fit on one page, if you do Control Enter, you put your cursor at the top top left-hand corner of the box and hit Control Enter, it'll move the entire box down to the next page. It looks better that way. So just some small things. I'll point that out again to you when I make my markups, but just telling you now. Porter's 5 forces are basically, who in here who has not taken one of my classes before knows what Porter's 5 forces are? Okay, so Porter's 5 forces is a way, they're named after Michael Porter, who was a Harvard professor that came up with this little tool. It's a way of looking at any industry. So in any particular industry, there's the power of buyers, the power of suppliers, how easy it is for new companies to enter the market, how many substitutes are there for your product. So in the case of the auto industry, a substitute product is not another car, but public transport, for example, or a bicycle if you live close to, or you're making the choice to live close to work. Those are substitutes. A direct rival or competitor would be another car company. But this is the same thing. You're also going to you're just going to go to a different database and find a report that's on Porter's 5 forces for your industry. You're going to copy and paste it and footnote it. Okay? And again, you're going to exercise a little bit of judgment on what to copy and paste here, so that, I don't want a page for each box. I want you to give me a sentence or 2 in each box, just enough to justify why this is moderate, high, or low. Not everything that's in the document. Please do not copy and paste everything. Just copy and paste enough. Okay? So that's that. Market positioning maps are basically, who here is marketing focused and is familiar with these? Wow. So a market positioning map is really just, it's making 2 axes, so a y and an x, and finding some characteristic, some factor that is different about the 2 companies, and then mapping the 2 companies on this axis. So you can choose anything. There's no database for this. It's just you understanding enough about the companies to find something interesting to show the difference between them. So when it comes to Google and Microsoft, what I did here was just said, okay, Google actually, because of their cooperation with Apple at the time that I wrote this, every iPhone had Google as the default browser, or the default search engine, and it also since they bought Motorola, all the droids run the Google operating system, and they all have Google as the browser. So they have this dominant position in mobile search, but we're using I use Google Docs and Google Drive a fair amount in this class, but how many people here have worked extensively with Google Docs as opposed to Microsoft? So Jacqueline, right? What has your experience been with Google Docs?
It's just easier. Like, 'cause I don't have a flash drive, so I could just get it on the computer here and just download. It's just easier.
Has anybody been frustrated with using Google Docs? Samantha?
I had an issue where I had like one account that was like a basic, and then I had to make a professional account for school.
Mm-hmm.
And my phone took my regular one, and then so when I wanted to get on something a friend had shared me, it wouldn't let me on, so I had to make another one, and then I had to fight between the two, and I had to change the password to one, and then it would set, and then I'd go get on my phone, and it would say no, and then I have to redo it on my phone, and then the one on the computer would. It took me like 3 hours, and I finally got it.
For something that should take 5
And now I
minutes.
just have a Chromebook, so I'm like, there you go. I just delete it.
I have had similar frustrations. Marissa, did you have an example too?
Their
It's
Excel-
Marissa, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Their Excel sheets are just, their format's a little bit different. They can't do as many formulas, you can't format it as easy as you can Excel.
Yeah.
You can't put notes in it.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just go in and like make a note on one cell.
Yeah, you can, but when you send that as an attachment through Microsoft Excel, the notes don't come out.
So, yeah, I mean, both of these are great examples. Huh? No, I like them too, and Google's making a lot of progress, but as it stands right now, case in point, I'm showing you, I did this presentation in Microsoft Word, not like Google Doc. Most of us are like extremely accustomed to using Microsoft Office products because they're everywhere and they have been for a long time. So Microsoft has a big head start in like having an installed base of well vetted and tested for all the problems that Microsoft has. They've spent a long time perfecting how to do Word documents and spreadsheets and stuff. So all of us know where to click what to be able to make things do what we want them to do, even if they might be able to be more efficient as software. We're all familiar with them. Google Docs are more in their infancy, and they're trying to grow in this respect. So that was a useful way to compare the two companies. You can choose any axes you want. Just don't choose, for one, don't choose something like, in the case of Google and Microsoft, like, let's say, like financial capital base and global reach, you know? So like, is it a high or low amount of equity capital? And is it a high or low global reach? In that case, like where would both companies be? If this is high global reach and low global reach, and this is high amount of capital and low amount of capital? Anyone? They're going to both be right here. Like the bubbles will be on top of each other because they both have a crap load of money and they both are like ubiquitously present all over the world. So if you come up with axes that the companies are the same on, it doesn't tell me anything about how they're different. So please don't use axes that are the same for both companies, and don't use ones that are obvious. So like if you have price here and quality here, like what is usually the case when you have like low price? Low quality. And if you have high price? So yeah, like the relationship between price and quality is always going to go like this. Like you're never going to have a high price for crappy quality. Like nobody would pay a high price for crappy quality. So you also don't want to have axes that are obvious. But other than that, you can choose whatever you want. And I just want you to draw the map here and then give me some comments explaining what each of the axes mean and why you put the company where you did. 1-2 sentence max. Okay? And then finally, on the external analysis, there's market sizing. This is not in the textbook anywhere. It's really not in any like senior capstone or business strategy textbook, and I think that's a huge like weakness of like most texts and like the way this class normally runs. It's a hugely useful and important skill for like many of the jobs that many of you guys will be working on in the coming years. And it just basically is about finding some kind of concrete information, making some logical, documented assumptions, and then multiplying numbers together to come up with an estimate of how many customers and how much potential revenue you think there is out there in a certain market. So this is an exercise that I've had to, like, when I was interviewing for consulting jobs, when I was interviewing for business development jobs at Bertelsmann back in the day, they would ask me a question, like the interview would be something like, tell me how many manhole covers you think there are in the city of New York. Go. So, Anthony, if I asked you that question, what would you do to estimate it? Yeah, so that would not be the answer they were looking for. So but you know, who knows how many manhole covers there are in the city of New York? But one way to estimate that would be to say, okay, I don't live in New York, but I live in Bakersfield. We have manhole covers here too. So, like, if I think about, I go on an exercise walk, like most nights after it gets cool enough, and I'm walking around my neighborhood in Westchester, and I've noticed that like pretty much every time I cross through the intersection, there's a manhole cover at the intersection. So, by that logic, we could say that like for each street block, there's one manhole cover based on Bakersfield standards. And then we simply need to multiply by a certain grid of how many streets go this way, how many streets go this way, and that'll give us a number of manhole covers. But then maybe we need to adjust it because New York has a hell of a lot more going on underneath it than Bakersfield does. I mean, earthquakes aside, so maybe because of all of the infrastructure and subway and more extensive like sewer and ventilation and stuff, maybe there's actually 3 times as many manhole covers because New York has a lot more. Let's 3 times because New York is 3 times as old as Bakersfield. I don't know, some reason to come up with 3 times versus 2 times. And you multiply those numbers together and you come up with a number like, I don't know, if we say that Manhattan is, I don't know, it's not really that wide, so say 20 blocks wide. I know that by the time you get up into Harlem, you're in the like 150 or so streets, I think. So let's call it 200 streets by 50 streets. So 200 times 50 is 10,000, and 10,000 times 3 would be 30,000 manhole covers. I have no idea if it's right or not, but at least I can document to you exactly how I came up with the number 30,000. That's what I want you guys to do for estimating how big the market is for products in whatever industry you're looking at. So in the case of Google, this is a little bit different than most of yours are going to be because Google actually doesn't sell things directly to consumers. They sell advertising to advertisers. So I had to add a couple of additional calculations here, which are not, it's going to be easier for most of you because you're just going to calculate if it's a consumer business like a restaurant or a company like Pepsi or Red Bull, you're really just counting how many people are going to, like, if Pepsi were going to come out with like a competing, actually I just noticed the other day, how many people here use SodaStream besides me? Okay. And I'm calling on you less because I've called on you in like a whole class before. So, Jacqueline, you use SodaStream? Have you noticed that it's hard as hell to find the damn syrup now? Yeah. I went online to go buy syrup, and I noticed that Pepsi actually is selling little, like, you can do homemade Pepsi. So Pepsi has a cooperation with SodaStream, so that instead of buying like a SodaStream cola, you can buy Pepsi cola, and it's more expensive because it has the Pepsi brand name, but it tastes just like Pepsi. So that's a good example. Like, if you were doing an analysis on Pepsi, that'd be interesting to say, okay, well, how many of these SodaStream things could Pepsi sell? Like, let's estimate. Like, so based on this room, that's basically 3 of us, 3 out of 50. So for easy numbers, let's call 3 out of, let's call it 4 out of 40. So that's 10%. That'll be an easier number to calculate with than 3 out of 50. 4 out of, so 10% of the total market of soda drinkers is drinking this, but then you're also going to have to say, you know, I don't always drink Pepsi, I drink all the other flavors too. So it's only sometimes I drink cola, so forth and so on. But you're coming up with a dollar amount of how many of these little, like, $5 per package Pepsi things are we going to be able to sell in the United States in the next year. In this case, it's a little bit different, but as an example of how I came up with this, and again, all of the stuff I'm showing you guys right now, I'm showing you what the end product looks like. We'll go through each week, and we'll just spend a whole lecture on the internal analysis tools. We'll spend a whole lecture just on the external analysis tools. And then after you do your drafts, I'll go through, I'll choose some of your drafts as examples of, okay, this was right, this is something we should edit, and as soon as I possibly can, I will send you all the markups of my, I can't go through 45 different like edits in class, there's not enough time, but I'll go through a few as examples and then send everybody their comments as an attached document on email, okay? Okay, so in this case, I started, like, I wanted to know, like, first of all, when you're doing this, you're going to decide what is the product you're doing market sizing for. So just pick one that seems like it would be interesting. It's usually going to be a new product for the company, or it's going to be a new market. So in the case of GM, it might be, in the case of GM, it could be a new, like, you know, their latest, what is it, Chevy Volt. So it could be like Chevy Volt 2.0, you know? Like, what's the new Volt going to sell for? Or you could be looking at, you know, let's, like, what is the normal, like, truck, the Silverado. So you could say, you know, we want to sell more Silverados in, like, we want to sell more Silverados in Sonoma County, you know? Like, theoretically, they should be selling more there, but, you know, everybody kind of likes to go eat wine and cheese, and so there's not as many Silverados as there should be. What could we do to sell more Silverados in Sonoma County? So it's either an existing product to a new market or a new product to an existing market. And you got to start with, so you make up the information here. So in this case, I was thinking, I use a specific search on Google a lot called Google Scholar. Like, the other half of my job besides teaching you guys is being an author, and it's a very specific type of author. Like, I have to go in and I write journals for academic, I write articles for academic journals, and you have to do a lot of stuff to, like, refer to other people's work in the field. So, you know, I am claiming this based on the work of, you know, Jones and Smith, 1976, and then building on that was Hofstadter and McGillicuddy from, like, 2001, and my work builds on these two things. So I had to go out and find a lot of, like, relatively obscure information and refer to it in my papers. So I use Google Scholar a lot. And how many people have people in here used Google Scholar before? So Esperance, right? What have you used it for? Okay, so let's go to scholar.google.com. So if I just, what did you search for at that time? So your English class, I want to know, like, you know, like Virginia Woolf as metaphor. And this basically brings up any article that someone has written about like metaphor or Virginia Woolf's work being used by other people to talk about metaphors, etc., etc. You'll notice there's nothing on the right-hand side here. Usually when you do a Google search, there's a bunch of advertisements you can click on here. Google's not selling anything to people that use Google Scholar right now. I thought, wow, like, I use this thing all the time. Like, I bet Google could, like, start target marketing to academics like me and sell stuff that would be of interest to me on the right-hand side here. That's additional advertising revenue for them. So that is what I did the sizing on here. And I basically, I put my own, actually this has gone up, but it used to be, those used to be my demographics more or less. The salary is still pretty much in the middle of that range. My annual travel budget is higher, but I'd like to combine like conference and personal travel. When I fly to like present papers at conferences, I usually try to combine that by visiting friends of mine that live close to where that conference is. So I went out and found some information on online about the total number of education professionals in the United States. I made some multiplications to try and make that more reasonable. You'll notice here they were hard data assumptions. That comes from some piece of information that I found from an official report of some kind. Anecdotal assumptions are numbers that are based in fact, but they're usually based on your personal experience or someone else's experience rather than an official report. And then educated guess assumptions are reasonable guesses that you make off the top of your head. And I'm going to want each of you to make at least one kind of each of these assumptions in the calculation that you make. We'll get into all that when I talk about the details. That's basically what that tool looks like, and that is the 4 tools that are external analysis. So 1 week, those 4 pages are what you'll have to fill out for the draft. And then internal analysis tools, there's just 2 here, but one of them is relatively extensive. So value chain benchmarking, you'll notice, is all in blue here. You're basically going to take the top factors that when you did the business model, you had a certain list of resources needed. You're going to take those resources needed and title the rows here after the resources needed in the business model, and then you're going to say how important is each of those resources for the company to be successful. So in the case of Google and Microsoft, they both, if they don't have the best quality search engine or the best quality Word document application around, they're toast. So the quality of the technology is extremely important for both of them. In order to develop good quality technology, they have to have really, really smart people working for them and do really, really cutting-edge R&D to constantly come up with better and better products. Sales and marketing is kind of important, but honestly, in some cases, the quality of the Google product is even more important than what they do because they have such a corner on what they do in the market right now. There's some other things here that were less important but still important, and then you give a little description here of why each of those is more or less important. So you're basically going to fill out this column with a percentage amount, and then you're going to fill here a justification for why the percentage is higher or lower. They should add up to 100%. It's all based on your own gut feeling. There's no place to go find that information. Just write it down based on what you think is the case. Then you're going to fill out one of these for each of the two companies. So the weights, you'll notice, are exactly the same as what they were here. You're just basically going to copy and paste those two columns in here. And then you're going to rate each company on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best and 1 being the worst. Like, how good is Google's technology? Well, at the time I wrote this up, it's pretty damn amazing, and it pretty much has stayed that way. There's, Bing has tried to compete with Google. Other Yahoo at one time was trying to compete with them. Google's pretty much steamrolled everyone when it comes to searches. I mean, there's even a verb called to Google something. I mean, it's like Kleenex. I mean, Kleenex is actually a brand name, not a product. But nobody calls them tissues. They call them Kleenex because Kleenex has been so successful with their branding. Huh?
Xerox.
Yeah, Xerox as well. I mean, Xerox, it's a photocopier, not a Xerox, but because Xerox was so successful, people call it a Xerox. So Google's pretty damn good with their technology, so I gave them a 10. And I gave a little description here. They have the top search engine in the business. Its success in maintaining, coupled with near unanimous praise, justifies a 10 rating. Give me a sentence or two explaining why you gave the company a 10. Or, in the case of distribution, I gave Google a 3 instead of 10, because really, for a long, long time, they didn't need distribution. They don't have to care about relationships with physical stores and stuff. So, I explained why I gave them a lower number here, and so forth. And you're just going to take the percentage, multiply it by the rating, and come up with a score, and then add those scores up at the bottom. 10 would be the maximum possible, and 0 if they actually 1, I guess, is on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is the least they could get. So if it were 1 in all these categories, it'd be a 1 here as a total score. Do that for Google. Do it for one company. Do it for the other company. That's in your own words. And then leveraging international, national, regional competitiveness. This is similar to what I wanted you to do with management analysis tools. You're going to go in and you're going to do a search on news sources like information you find in Google, so forth and so on, and you're going to answer each of these questions for me. So in location advantages, if we go back to the template again, I'm showing you what it looks like when it's finished, but I give you some descriptions in the template of what I want. So if we go back to the blank document that you're going to fill out and scroll down to that section. There we go. So this is the blank one. I want you to go to these databases to try and find information. I will go over all that again when we do the lecture on these things. And then here's the questions I want you to answer. So for location advantages, how does the company tailor its sales and marketing efforts in different markets? So do you do different, if we're talking about, let me use another example. Tanya, what I forget. What is your career focus? What companies were we going to focus on maybe for your case analysis? So what career-wise? I forget. What are you interested in? Huh? Well, yes. Oil business, agriculture business, finance, accounting. Finance. Okay, so let's think about comparing JP, like I said before, JP Morgan Chase and Northwestern Mutual. So you're just going to pick one of them. Let's say JP Morgan Chase. So company, we're going to put JP Morgan Chase. So you just pick one of the two companies for this exercise here, and then I want to know: are they doing something? Is JP Morgan Chase offering different products? Are they doing some kind of different marketing here in Bakersfield compared to what they do in New York City or what they do in Miami? Tell me something different that they're doing sales and marketing wise in the local market. For value chain improvements, I want to know. JP Morgan Chase's headquarters, I believe, are in New York. So I want to, but they have branches everywhere. So I want to know what somebody in the Bakersfield office or the San Francisco office or the San Antonio, Texas office came up with that was a good idea that everybody else in JP Morgan started using. So the point here is to tell me something that the non-headquarters location came up with. In the case of global companies, we're talking about, if it's Sony, for example, Sony is a Japanese company, so I want to know something that one of the locations within Sony came up with, not in Japan, that was a good idea that the rest of the company adopted. If it's a U.S. company like Chevrolet, what did Chevrolet learn from its manufacturing operations in Brazil? For example. And then finally, profit sanctuaries. I just want you to tell me what are the markets where that company makes the most revenues, whether it's regional, national, international. We'll get more into that later. So you're going to fill out those 3 boxes again with a sentence or two. So if we go back to the sample case, you'll notice each of these just have 1 sentence. This one has 2, but not very much. Well, I put a little bit more in here just to give some information about different markets, but there's, again, it's 1 page. You're writing a sentence or 2 about information that you found by searching online, and then again you're going to footnote where you found that information. Finally, there's 2 sections left: financial analysis, then go back to the summary, and we'll call it a day. Financial analysis. For those of you who are accounting or finance focused people, some of this will be a bit more familiar to you. For those of you who are not, I think you all had to take like a certain basic accounting class at some point in your undergrad, didn't you? Isn't that a required class? I'm starting to cooperate more with this is my 2nd year teaching here, so I just joined my first committee. Like the first year they let me off like with a free pass, so I don't have to like be on any committees that meet. I can just teach class and go home and work on like writing deep thoughts and trying to win a Nobel Prize. But now I have to like meet with committees on campus sometimes. So my first committee is the curriculum committee for our undergrad degree, and I'm starting to learn just now what all the rest of my colleagues are teaching. So I know that you guys have an accounting class. I know the people that teach it, but I haven't actually started working with, I just before this class sent Dee Wu my syllabus and said, Dee, please send me yours. And I just was talking with Harvey McCown last week about how he describes financial statements. I'm going to start trying to refer to that stuff more. So you should have all been exposed to this, but some of you probably were like paying more attention than others because it's your focus and it's what you're interested in doing in your career. So I'm going to give everyone a crash course in how to calculate financial averages. There will have a whole lecture where all I talk about is what do I mean by operating profit margin? What is the current ratio? What is the long-term debt to equity ratio? How do you calculate it? Where do you find the information? And once I've taught you all how to do that, some of you already know it, some of you need some help with the refresher. You're just going to go out and find the information. In this case, a lot of these numbers were in that case in the book. The ones that weren't, I went out and found online, and I calculated what these ratios are for each company, and then I went and found what's the industry average for that company. All of this information is available from different books, databases, so forth. I will walk all of you through in painstaking detail how to do this, so don't worry if it looks unfamiliar right now. But you're going to go out, you're going to find a bunch of numbers, you're going to calculate them and put them in this table, and then you're going to give me an assessment here below with bullet points, like comparing the 2 companies to each other and to the industry and telling me what do the numbers mean. So, excuse me, as a brief example, like profitability, most of us understand here what that is. Basically, like your operating profit margin is just your total revenues minus your cost of goods sold. So, total revenue minus cost of goods sold divided by total revenue. Okay, so to make it a percentage instead of a dollar number. So 35%, basically, after Google takes in like all their money, and you sort of subtract out what they considered to be the cost of goods sold is a little bit weird with Google and Microsoft because they don't make a physical product. Normally, if Google were like a car company, like all of the supplies and parts and the labor that it took to make a car, like, that might have been 5,000, and you sell the car for 10,000. So you get a 50% margin, for example. In this case, Google's percentage is 35, Microsoft's is 38. The average in the industry is 3% for software, for advertising, and 2% for software. So, like, what's the first thing that sticks out to you about those numbers? Huh? Well, the industry's small. What about Google and Microsoft?
What was the question again?
What stands out to when you look at 35%, 38%, 3%, 2%? What stands out to you?
Massive market share.
These are a lot bigger than those. So here, I just wrote down both companies have similar profit margins, 35, 38%. They both have healthy operating margins. Microsoft is considerably more above the average in the software sector. Google is actually, it's a typo. Google is slightly below the industry average for, I actually typed that wrong. So it's pretty profitable to be an advertiser. It's not very profitable to be a software company, if you look at all software companies. So long story short, both Google and Microsoft have pretty damn good profit margins, but Google's compared to the advertising industry is a little bit less than normal. Microsoft is way, way better than normal in software. And that's it. That's what I want you to write here. And you're going to do you're going to do the same thing for each of the 4 types of ratios. So just compare the 2 companies to each other and compare them to the industry. Make sense? And just summarize that for me in a sentence or 2 for each of those 4. Make sense? Okay, last thing, and we'll call it a day. The summary. So after you've gotten done with all the analyses, the last thing you're going to do is kind of sum it all up. And what I want here, this is all in your own words, and first of all, I want one paragraph telling me what do you think, after all of the analyses you did, what's the most important thing that you noticed in all of those analyses? Was it like the glaring differences in profit margin between the 2 companies? Is it the fact that one of them is way better at finding and recruiting employees than the other one? Is it the fact that one of them has a really dominant market share with these customers? Is it that one of them is a whole lot better in their internal operations when you benchmark the 2 against each other? What really stood out to you? So in my case, when I wrote this up, what really stood out to me is that the business models are different. Like I said at the beginning, the biggest thing that is going to determine success between these 2 companies is in my opinion, Microsoft is the one that's in trouble of the 2 companies. The whole future of our online ubiquitous cloud oriented world is that you're not going to pay per package anymore. Most Google, most Microsoft Office products, various things, are available for a really cheap subscription fee, or in Google's case, absolutely free online. And the business model is to give the crap away for free and then meticulously keep track of everything that I ever do when I use this. I mean, it may seem kind of intrusive, but one of the reasons that Google is coming up with all these things is so that they can track exactly what I'm doing every time I click on a cell, every time I write a document. They see what's the document about, and that tells you a whole lot about how to market and advertise things to me, because you can see everything I ever write in a damn document. You can see everything I ever calculate in a spreadsheet. So it's a little disturbing, but that's kind of the direction the world is going in, is to be able to capture advertising information by watching how you use the software. I could be wrong, but I think that's the direction we're headed. So in my opinion, like what's going to determine the future is how good each of the companies is at finding eyeballs and delivering those to advertisers. So that's the key issue. It's just one paragraph. You'll notice it's not a lot of writing. And then in each section, I went through and made some kind of observation about what I thought was most important and what my suggestion is. So business model, the two value propositions are different. Microsoft needs to expand their value proposition, period. Managerial execution. This is actually a little bit out of date. There used to be a row in there for culture. I took it out to make things a little simpler. In this case, one of the biggest differences in execution between the two companies is that Microsoft has a really ingrained culture. It's hard for Microsoft to do things differently. Like, they make software a certain way. They build bugs into it so that you have to buy new releases. Like, they usually take an existing product and make it better rather than being innovative, and that's what they do. That's what they've been doing for 30 years. And like trying to like do new things is very difficult for Microsoft compared to Google. So I mentioned here, Microsoft's got to find a way to overcome that. So on and so forth. In each of these areas, just a sentence or two with what you suggest one of the two companies should do in each of those areas. Okay, so 2 pages really. It's not a whole lot, but I want you to be thoughtful about what you're putting here. So it's not a lot of writing, but like I want it to be good and correct in this case. So that's basically case analysis. I think I said when we got back to the end, I wanted to go back to the spreadsheet briefly. Is that right? Like to the list of everybody's like career goals. What else did I say I wanted to get back to? I forget. Somebody remember? I totally forget at this point. So anyway, last thing, just like to remind you all again. Actually, we have now that I remember that it was next weekend, not this weekend. We got a little more time, but again, just to remind you guys, I went in and for each of you, I made a tentative suggestion what I thought would be a good focus for your paper topic, but I might be wrong. Okay, so Nalita, for example, I think you said you're interested in advertising. So, you heard of Omnicom before? No. Have you heard of BBWO? Or BBDO? Basically, BBDO is a huge advertising agency based out of New York. Omnicom and Gray Advertising is another one. Omnicom is the parent company that owns them. So if you go out and search on Omnicom, you'll find all the information you're looking for those companies. And then I would suggest comparing them to some kind of smaller advertising agency here if you're interested in marketing and advertising. If not, you can change this and put whatever you want there in your focus, okay? Same thing for everybody else. I tried my best to make a guess. If I was wrong, like in the case of if you want to do GM and VW instead of dealerships, no problem. And if I was totally off base in something, I can think, who told me that, like, I forget who told me that, like, somebody had filled out their, yeah?
Yeah, I fixed it.
Okay, good. So, Jessica, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you got this fixed now, but you still need to choose an industry. So, I mean, in case of accounting, you can work for a CPA firm, or you can do corporate accounting inside of another company. So like doing accounting for the oil business, for ag sector, whatever you want. So, the sooner you choose these, the faster I can start giving you help and tips. And if you don't choose that by next weekend, then you sort of have to choose by default because you're going to be doing your case paper. And if you change your mind after that, you kind of wasted your time on the first one because you have to redo it for a different industry. So think about these and try and settle on something by next weekend, okay? That's all I got. Have a great weekend. If there's anything I forgot, give me my attendance sheet, and next week it'll be back in the correct order. Sorry about that.
Can I find?
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
This weekend, so we're doing the business model section this weekend?
No, I misspoke. It's next weekend.
Okay, perfect.
So you're actually not just that. You're doing the management tools. So those three.
Okay.
But I forgot. It's not this week. This weekend is your LinkedIn profile. I think you already sent me.
I did.
Yeah. So LinkedIn profile, your professional development plan,
Yeah.
and then the Globus quiz. And as a group, you got to make your practice decisions.
Yes, we already
The
did that.
case is next week. Sorry, I was wrong.
Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead.
I printed the wrong page, so I didn't
Ah.
get a picture.
That's a nice picture. Did you draw this?
Yeah, really quick.
Wow. That's really impressive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Were we supposed to print that out?
No.
Oh.
Like,
But,
eventually, I think Gloria can send me a list of the numbers. She just told everybody, if you're worried about it, print it to make sure.
Yeah.
But if you say you did it,
Yeah.
and I can't find it from Gloria, we'll figure it out. But it should be fine.
okay.
Oh, so you don't need this?
No, if you printed it, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry.
But I mean, I don't want to kill any more trees than we have to. So
Okay.
I think I can get the list from Gloria. But just in case there was a problem, this is your backup plan.
I'm going to change, because I actually did research on one of the competitors. It's really hard to find information, because Indonesians don't really work with websites or anything. And also, I was going to just do Performance Shop, because I explained my professional development, and it's completely changed from like last quarter. So
Thank you.
I wanted to ask if I could do like 2 performance shops or my case analysis.
I mean, like comparing Rude Boy to another one.
Or like 2 big, like
Yeah,
big
yeah,
ones.
you can. But I your family has some really freaking badass businesses.
Yeah.
You know, like you're like the Rockefellers of Indonesia, and I know it might be tough to find information on your competitors, but if you wanted to, you're welcome to do performance shops. If you wanted to, I can help you find information on some of the competitors. Like,
Yeah.
if you choose, whichever you choose is fine with me.
Okay.
But it may not be as hard as you think. I think I can
Yeah.
help a little bit.
Okay.
But if you want to change, that's fine with me.
Do you want me to just change it on there?
Yeah,
Or? Okay.
just go in and type it.
Perfect. Well, I'll
Cool.
think about it and I'll figure it out.
Think about it, but yeah, if you want to focus on the performance shops, I know in some ways that's where your passion is anyway.
Yeah.
So
Well, the thing is, once I'm done here, I'm gonna do a master's, so I'm gonna be doing both things instead of like going back home, like what my professional development was last year.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna be staying here a lot longer than I was
Cool.
expecting.
Change it.
So I'll figure it out.
for what it's worth, like you're still going to be related to your family no matter
Yeah,
what,
exactly.
and I think it's cool what they're involved in. So,
Yeah.
like
Well, I'll-
as your career goes on over the coming years, like make sure to keep in touch with what you're
Yeah,
what you're
definitely.
doing there because it's cool stuff.
I'll talk to my mom, figure it out.
Okay, cool. Change it if you want, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a couple questions.
Uh-huh.
For this one, can I focus on two?
Rachel, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because my major is accounting,
Mhm.
I said probably I will enroll to the real estate, that part.
Mhm.
So I want to focus on both two. Is that okay?
On both.
Yes.
On what?
Huh?
I didn't understand. What do you want to focus on?
The accounting and the real estate.
So comparing the two industries.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will enroll to both.
So like one real estate company and one accounting firm.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Like I said for what's her name? Your teammate.
Teammate Lancy or
No.
Maria?
No, not your teammate. Sorry. What I said
yeah.
for Yanira.
Oh,
like
okay.
same thing. It's going to be more work, but if you want to compare one accounting firm and one real estate firm, no problem. Okay.
And then, another question is my extra credit. I think they print me out, but already emailed to you. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I anybody that emailed something to me, I just copied and pasted in a place.
Oh, okay.
So I think my colleague Gloria can just send me a list of everybody's student ID numbers.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was just as a backup, just
Oh,
in case
okay.
she couldn't figure the list out,
Okay.
that you send it to me. But if you email this, no problem. You don't have to print it.
Okay, that's good. And then another question is for the strategic plan for the
Mhm.
tablet. And yeah, for the for the basic
I'm
line.
listening. I just remembered that I have